Oh, hey!
Still here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the raid. You were in the A&E Rivals 2 bracket. I was, actually. Were you there as well? Oh, oh, wait, no, I do remember the name. Oh, sick. Oh my gosh. And then let me... Yep, okay. I was about to say, name, kind of familiar. Icon, super familiar. I definitely remember Toast. I actually have one of the pictures that we took together.
The Rivals community is very tight-knit. That's so cool you
Yeah.
guys know each other.
Yeah, there were like a few super cool people that I ended up, you know, even if I didn't like spend a super long time talking to them when I was at the con, at least like had good matches against them. We talked, you know, pretty friendly after it was all said and done, all that fun stuff. And I think I am remembering correctly, right? Toast, you were also a Maple player, correct? And we took the silly Maple picture together, or am I getting a name mixed up?
We love
Either way, I do
Maple
remember your suit. Yes, we did the ditto. Okay. And I might have actually shown you that picture, Gally. Yeah, we did the pose. We had, if you still have the pictures. Oh yeah, you know what? After this match, I'll bring them up on stream.
Did you do that's a rap post?
Yeah, no, it was the, we did the taunt pose, because we had a moment where we were like, we wanted to do a pose for like a picture.
Yeah.
Like, and make it a Maple pose, because we did the Maple ditto in bracket. And we were like,
Right.
what pose does Maple do? I guess the taunt pose. So we did the taunt pose together. Oh, okay. It'll like struggle to load in here. I made like a little like convention recap stream that I did after the con.
It's like a web tree.
Yeah. Where I basically was
Dude.
like, oh, it's gonna struggle getting close in here. Whoa, there we go. You know, kind of like me arriving. I kind of tried to like group samey photos together. This was like the first day. Rivals tournament. There we go. There's the picture. And then another
Oh, it's
picture
the
of just kind of
pose.
side by side there.
Get
And
him,
Lucius.
Lily.
Yeah. I was like, for context, this is what we're doing. Yeah, this was a super cool vibe.
I've seen a couple pictures, but I didn't see all of these, no.
I was gonna say, I feel like at the very least I might have sent this one for Maple reasons, but I might not
Yeah.
have sent all of them. This was super fun though. I'm glad that I did. Like, at first there was a small part of me that was like, you know, I do fighting game tournaments a lot on my own time. Should I be spending my convention time just doing like another tournament, playing the game that I always play outside of tournament? But I made a lot of great, unique memories going to both tournaments, so it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad that I did it. And also, small world coming full circle right now, and, you know, now we're talking to Toast again. How about that? Gonna head out tonight, but it was nice catching up. Try to catch more streams when I can. Yeah, no, that'd be awesome. It has been super fun. Whoa. Catching up and chatting. I think I've just always tried to treat streaming in the most like casual of casual ways. That is like generally, you know, I've talked about this a little bit before. There are benefits that come with the numbers being there, whether it's, you know, active chat members making chatting more easy, like straight up like segments that feel a little weird if you're just doing it for one person, but can be fun to like put together. Like, blah, blah, blah. Whenever I do like recap type stuff, I'm always like, I don't want to just start talking to literally nobody. Like, so I think that's the only time where I get any kind of hung up on numbers, but realistically, I don't care in the big picture. I just kind of like being a vibe and being a place that people can hang out and chat if they want to hang out and chat. I saw a video the other day that was kind of talking about like the quote-unquote old internet, which on a surface level, I was worried it was just going to be like, you know, back in my day, things were better kind of video. Because that does happen a lot with, you know, the early 2000s. Especially, like, in the internet space. Like, there's a lot of people who just kind of, like, get silly and nostalgic about that stuff for the sake of being silly and nostalgic about it. Which is, like, fine, but it makes for, you know, pretty silly content that I usually don't particularly care to watch. That goes for, you know, a lot of different types of content where it's just people kind of being like, remember when things were awesome back when I was a kid? And it's like, I can relate to that on a base level, but it feels a little silly. But it was a much more nuanced take on it. That was kind of talking about how the internet, the way that the internet used to be set up was very much kind of like a series of places, and that's like how everybody treated it. Like, even down to the fact that web pages very often had like an entry door that you would click on an entry door that you would click on first, or like they had guest books, so you could just say how your time on the random website was. And obviously, there was a ton of expression that came from a website being able to be whatever the heck you wanted. For better or worse, because obviously not everybody's a designer. But I mean, that was just kind of part of the fun of it. And I just kind of thought that was a neat way to look at it, because obviously that is not what the internet is anymore. Now it's all just the social media platforms where it's all weird and algorithm-based, and you're not just kind of making things for the sake of making them. Usually it's like, whether you are playing outside of that system, you're still kind of beholden to the algorithms doing their thing and all that fun stuff. And just the fact that the platforms are inherently pretty limiting. And I think it just kind of got me thinking about the fact that I wonder if, for me, like, not that I specifically ever had, like, this thought in my head, like I was, like, itching to go back to those days or whatever. But, you know, as a kid, I do remember having fun with that kind of stuff. Like, back when MySpace let you, like, super customize your profile. Like, as you can see by the way that I treat my stream overlay and all the redeems and stuff like that. Even if it's, like, only for me and a handful of people, I like fiddling with stuff and making it look nice. And changing small numbers by, you know, tiny pixels, even if basically I'm the only one who notices, because I just want things to look good, because I have fun making things look good. I think it kind of made me realize that, like, the way that they were describing the way that the old internet was, like web, like 1.0, so to speak, is like kind of what Twitch is, except instead of a web page, it's, you know, the stream overlay, the chat, like, you kind of, you know, it is more of like an actual place. There isn't just like an endless scroll. Like, you go into a chat and you're like in that chat. So you can literally, like, you know, you say hello and goodbye and close out of it very easily. In a way that feels like you're visiting. Like, especially if it's, you know, more so like friends of yours as opposed to just like random big streamers. Or at the very least, like, if it's a chat that, like, you feel like you're part of a community member of, it feels so much more like a place in that regard. And I just think that's kind of neat. And I wonder, like, you know, subconsciously, obviously, because I didn't really think about it this hard until I saw that video that was talking about it like this. I wonder if that's why Twitch almost came more naturally to me, is that I like the way it's more personal. I like the way that it feels like it's a place. I like the fact that not only can I have fun expressing myself with it, but like everybody can. Like, everybody's space is their own space, and it's fun to see what people do with their own space. I just think that's kind of neat. And I, you know, to an extent as well, almost, VR chat is kind of similar in a weird way. Although the expression much more just comes from the avatars themselves. But it still has that feeling of place in the sense that you need to literally, like, go into the worlds and walk up to the people. And that, in and of itself, feels a heck of a lot more special than just posts on social media. I think there's maybe just like a part of normal social media that just doesn't appeal to me because it's just missing like all of the things that Twitch has. And to an extent that VR chat has as well. Just all of the self-expression, all the communication that feels a lot more direct. I don't know. I just think that's interesting to think about. It's obviously still in the Twitch ecosystem, but it's like you're not even thinking about that while you're watching the stream. You're thinking of all the little ways that the streamer themselves set up everything in their stream. It's like it's its own little window into an old version of the internet. Really diligent with stuff like this. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I just have a lot of fun with it, and I want it to be interesting, or at the very least, I want it to be clean. And while I'm not going to pretend like I'm a perfect designer or anything, like I definitely stall out when it comes to bigger ideas. And I'm not particularly good at making original assets, which is a wall that I unfortunately find myself running up against a lot. I like to think I have at least just enough of an eye when it comes to, like, just even the little things like, what's the word I'm looking for? Composition. There we go. Like, my brain will really pick up on, like, if something isn't centered properly. Even if it's just by a few pixels, I'll be like, that doesn't look right. Let me tweak the amount of pixels that thing is centered. Composition. Oh, colors is another thing, and also just, like, legibility. Like, making sure that things are, like, very visible and easy to read and all that kind of stuff. Like, I have, if not an eye for that stuff, at least enough of a passion for it that I care to, like, mess with it a heck of a lot, which is... Obviously, this is kind of the end result of that. Like, I want to make sure that my stupid little blind box animation has some proper timing to it, because I think it looks and feels better when I tweak those tiny numbers until it does the right thing. And I don't know. I just think that's a lot of fun. Twitch feels a lot more like small, contained communities. You can opt out, in and out of, not so much traditional social media. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really cool. And I think that's something I didn't realize about it from the outside, because all I had really seen is, like, the fact that big streamers existed, and they all kind of had that, like, big social media influencer energy that I don't particularly like. Like, what's up, guys? We're back with another stream. Like, you know, that kind of, like, weird energy. Or the awful side of it, which also obviously was not appealing to me even a little bit. I'm also glad that I'm, maybe just with my luck, that I've ran into a lot of people who also care significantly more about, like, just the art of it and the social side of it, and less so, like, actually needing to depend on it for a living. Or even if they do, it seems like they've had, like, a pretty healthy path to it, and, like, you know, they haven't fallen down any weird rabbit holes with it that feel uncomfy. Like you said, it's all just, like, small communities. It just feels like I'm, like... It feels like a very accessible version of something like a voice chat, almost. Where... And it seems better than something like even a Discord channel, where things... Like... I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. Things are just very floaty, even in a Discord channel, where it's not like active conversations can happen, but things are, like, kind of structured in unnatural ways that aren't always conducive to the most, like, normal conversations. It's just different. It's not inherently bad or anything, it's just different. And I feel like Twitch, more than anything else, has kind of felt like, oh, I'm just going into this person playing a game, and when I say hi, we have a pretty normal conversation about it. And that's just cool. Like, it just kind of feels like we build off of there, as if we just bumped into each other in real life, with the big difference just being that, you know, I got a notification on my phone that said X person was live, and then I look at that and I'm like, oh, I should say hi. I think I've talked about this before, but I think the closest thing I had to, like, a controller hot take, I guess, is that while I do not like the Joy-Cons whatsoever, for obviously what they are, which is an extremely small, extremely uncomfortable controller with joysticks that barely work, I personally think that the D-pad being individual buttons is what I wish like every single D-pad was. Because I think that gives me what I'm looking for in a D-pad, which is that it feels very distinct which direction that you're pressing at all times. Which, like, is actually weirdly not that common. Like, a lot of D-pads are a little... Either it's hard to even hit the directions properly, or the directions aren't easy to distinguish from each other. But yeah, there was a very brief period of time where I actually messed around with Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle. For some bizarre reason, I decided to buy it for Switch initially. And I was like, wait, this D-pad actually kind of feels nice. Nothing else about it did, because I was using the Switch in handheld mode to play a fighting game. PlayStation D-pad is fine, I guess. This coming from someone who went through all of Celeste with the 360 D-pad. So, I have like a funny, I guess, like retroactive thing that happened with the 360 D-pad, where on paper, yes, like, well, you know, back when I originally was using the 360 as like my regular way to play games, I obviously pretty much always hated the D-pad. But if you noticed, this sure does look awfully similar to a 360 D-pad. But anyway, point being, what it did kind of train me to do, though, because of the way that it's designed, is instead of, like, pressing them as buttons, I kind of, like, roll my finger around it. So I'm, like, more focused on the outside of it and, like, rolling along the outside with my finger. As it turns out, that's pretty much how you're supposed to use the 360 D-pad. Which is just something that I never really was incentivized to practice in that way. So I think unironically, if I had to play a fighting game on the 360 and the D-pad is what made the most sense, I think I could actually very comfortably do it, just because I'm so wired to have that be how I use... Like, again, I'm used to using a weirdly similar D-pad now, after using that controller for so long. Could be worse, though. Let's not forget the SNES D-pad. Oh my god. I think it had just, like, there was, like, a point sometime in, like, the recent history, I don't know, like, the past, like, 5 years or so, where I think it had actually been well over 15 years since I had used any kind of retro controller, like NES, SNES, Sega Genesis, things like that. And, like, after having gone through, like, extremely bad carpal tunnel to the point where I'm, like, a little bit more careful nowadays with ergonomics and stuff, most modern controllers are extremely comfortable to my hands, like especially something like the Switch Pro controller, which is maybe at least a good part of the reason why I'm so attached to it, outside of it having the gyro and stuff, and a few other reasons. I don't need to go on that ramble right now. But, I just got hand cramps within, like, 2 minutes of trying to use... I think it was a Sega Genesis controller at the time. And then I remember when I went to A&E, they had, like, an SNES Classic in the game room. And I was like, fuck it, let's see how this goes. And it was awful, and I kind of wish I didn't do it, because I, like, felt it for the rest of the day. It is just a flat panel with buttons.
Impressive. I actually got a little...
What was I gonna say? Oh, I was talking about, like, the licensed games and stuff. We're just, like... I feel like it can be fun to revisit a licensed game of media you grew up with, but you didn't play the licensed game. It can just kind of feel like you're, like, digging into some, like, well, lost content. Like an extra episode of the show or something that you never got to experience because it was, like, only part of the game. And that's kind of neat. That being said, unfortunately, most licensed games aren't good. But I am sure there are some winners out there. Although on the flip side, I wonder... I'm curious how many licensed games are like... I'm sure a lot of licensed games are just kind of, like, lame and simple. But I have to wonder how many of them are, like, extremely unique, weird ideas that maybe I would actually end up liking a lot if I tried them, if that makes sense. Like a solid 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10 that the reviewers gave it because it was a weird ass game that was like hard to understand, or maybe the controls didn't feel great or something. But then I play the game in the current year, treat it like its own weird little thing, as somebody who has a pretty high tolerance for stuff like weird controls and whatnot, and like generally just like seeing weird ideas, and maybe find like a game that's super cool that has a lot to talk about in that regard. That would be like the hope of experimenting with random license games. Played the Hamtaro GBC game. It's actually very fun and charming. I've heard really good things about the Hamtaro games, which is good, because I that's honestly like a perfect example of something where it's like, I mean, granted, I don't know how well the game's like reviewed or whatever, but like, that's a weird ass idea for a game that probably wouldn't have never been, you know, especially at the time, just wouldn't have been approved as like a silly game on its own. Like, that's the kind of stuff you'd see out of like an indie game nowadays, if anything. But it was just a licensed game that the devs could get inspired by because Hamtaro as an IP had some ideas to work with. Felt like there was at least a brief period where like there were like a handful of like Xbox 360, PS3 games where it felt like it was like the very end of when those licensed games started being a thing. And it seems like some devs like tried to take it a little bit more seriously, but there was still a lot of bad stuff too. Either way, it's interesting that that's like not really that much of a thing anymore. Actually, usually when it happens now, it's like actually a pretty... it's like a game that like is trying to do something cool. Like how there was like a Rugrats game that came out recently where it's like, okay, more or less dead IP, like there is like recent Rugrats stuff but nobody cares about it, where they were like, let's get some devs to make a good game to bank on nostalgia, and apparently it's like a pretty good platformer. Like, it's doing something similar where it's just like the cartoon characters in a platforming game, but apparently it's actually a pretty good one, with like a lot of like care to the art direction and music and stuff like that. Feel a lot less like quick cash grabs, yeah. Because before it was just awful. Like I'm sure making them was also awful, with how little time and budget you probably had to work with on them, as opposed to now where there's no reason, you know, they just want to bank on nostalgia with them, so they might as well take their time with them.